Welcome back to the American Superbike Show. I am your host, Stitch Turner, and if you love MotoAmerica, then this podcast is for you. So please go ahead and like, follow, subscribe, but also do me a favor and tell a friend. You can tell them the host is just the worst, but since they really like MotoAmerica, just like you do, they should go ahead and listen anyways. All right, so as I sit here at my desk, it is Wednesday, January 7th. We are 57 days until bikes are on track at Daytona International Speedway. I am so freaking excited. I just can't wait. It's always one of my favorite weekends of the year. But before we get there, today we have a few news items that came out over the holiday break. And then, after that, I'm probably just going to ramble on a bit about the 2026 schedule as we currently have it. Speaking of that holiday break, I hope everyone was able to enjoy some surely well-earned downtime with their friends and family that they love, and probably some friends and family you don't even really love that much. But I really hope you are able to enjoy that time anyways. For me and my family, we do Christmas Eve at my mom's house, and it's, me and my wife and our kids and my sister and her kids, and so there's a whole lot of family there. Although we never really seem to be able to get quite all the kids together. This year, one of my 18-year-old daughters, she was off doing Christmas Eve with her boyfriend's parents' house. But, it's still a great time when we all get together. And then on Christmas Day, me and my wife, we hosted her side of the family, and it's always a lot of work and it's exhausting, but it's totally worth it. This year we did just a spaghetti lunch, but I made some homemade garlic bread to go with it, and it was just a great time. And then after all of that, the next day, me and my sister and my wife and all of the kids and whatnot, we make the trek about an hour south down to my dad's house to have dinner with him and my stepmom, the day after Christmas. So it's always just a really packed time of year, but it's so enjoyable, and I hope you're able to enjoy your holiday time as much as I was. So let's move on to the news of the week. First off, Saddlemen Race Development Team announced their plans for the 2026 season. In the baggers class, Corey West and Jake Lewis are going to, carry on again next year, just like they did from 2025. However, not just in MotoAmerica, they're also going to run this new Harley Bagger World Cup that's going to be at, I think, 6 MotoGP rounds, throughout the seasons. So they're going to be taking on that as well. So best of luck to them. It's going to be exciting to watch. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the baggers run at some of these, famous international circuits. And then Corey and Jake, they're also going to run into the Mission Super Hooligans National Championship next season. And they're in that class, they're going to have a third rider as a teammate, and that's going to be James Rispoli. Having Hog Spoli come over from Kyle Ryman Racing is going to ensure that the number one plate stays with Saddlemen Race Development Team for another season, because Corey West was running it last year. And so now we're getting at the point too, we're looking at 2026, with James Rispoli moving over from KWR, it means that for now, the KWR's time in Hooligans has probably come to an end. I'm just hoping that another team's going to be able to step up and kind of give them a challenge a little bit. It'll be nice to have, that there'll be 3 bikes, I guess, instead of just 2 running around at the front. But last year, it ended up being a little bit too much of the Harleys running around, and then everyone else was like, might as well have been in a different class. I just hope that we have a little bit more of an exciting championship this year. Even no matter how exciting the championship is going to be, all 3 of these riders are capable of winning it. So it's going to be worth watching. All right, let's move on to our next little piece of news, and that's going to be that Nathan Betancourt, he's going to be riding in the FIM Yamaha R3 Blue Crew World Cup. So he's going to be doing the complete season of there overseas. He still wants to do an additional wild card round or 2 here in MotoAmerica, most likely in the Talent Cup class. We will need to keep our eyes peeled for that youngster because, he's a good racer, and having the more quality racers that we have showing up for our rounds, the better, at least in my opinion as a fan. Moving on to our last little piece of news, Top Pro Edge Motorsports is going to be entering the Supersport class, running Ducati Panigale V2s for Jason Waters and Alex Arango. That's going to be great news. I'm glad to see the Top Pro is going to be making I don't want to say a full-time return, but Alex, I think it is a full-time return because I don't think Alex was able to do the full stock 1000 season last year or Superbike Cup. He had been running, both of those riders have been running BMWs in stock 1000 trim for the last handful of years. So it's going to be nice to see them come and step down and kind of add a little bit bolstering to that super sport class with, especially with the top of the field moving back up to superbike. It's, they're going to kind of help firm up that field a little bit. All right, well, let's move on to the 2026 schedule. Before we get too deep into the woods, let me just say that the build, train, race schedule isn't official yet, but I do kind of like have an assumption, and that's mainly based on not only just the way that MotoAmerica has scheduled the other classes at each round this season, but it's kind of I think it's also just going to be a repeat of next year. So I think that BTR is going to be at Barber, Road America, The Ridge, and VIR. And just like the rest of the MotoAmerica schedule, there's not a lot of changes. And there's definitely positive aspects of that, and just one negative aspect. And we're going to start with that first negative aspect, just because, well, frankly, it's easy, and we'll just go ahead and get out of the way. The only negative aspect to me is that I want more MotoAmerica. Having what I call 9 full MotoAmerica weekends every year, and then having Daytona as a 10th weekend, that's nice, but we still just end up with just a couple of gaps where we have multiple weeks, nearly a month between races, and that's just too long. I would like to see the series get to a place where 12 rounds are financially viable, and we'd be able to plug those couple of gaps with just, a couple of extra races. I don't really have specific tracks, in mind. It's just, I'm mainly just wanting to fill those two big gaps. So with that being said, let's go to the positives of the new schedule. One of the first things that stick out to me is the date equity. And you may be asking, what is date equity? And that is the practice of having an event, around the same time every year, so that your ticket buying consumer, they're able to develop the routine and the pattern and the expectation of when this event is going to be. You don't want to make it more difficult for them to, plan this adventure. A big example is Daytona. The Daytona 200 has been run on the last Saturday of Bike Week, as long as I've been alive, at least, and I'm well into my 40s. And because of that, I don't need to guess what date the race is going to be next year. This year the race is going to be on March 5th, and that's easy because I have the schedule in front of me. And now, if I just go and look at my outlet calendar here and I scroll forward, which I know this is fantastic podcasting, great audio. Scrolling forward, so next year, March 6th, I can already tell you that the race in 2027 will be on March 6th, because that's the proper weekend that it's going to fall on. That's the Saturday. And that kind of equity, I'm already planning my trip for next year, because I'm also that kind of nerd, so I can't help myself. But because I know the event's going to take place, I can go ahead and get those plans set in place, and it just... It really helps, and I think it's one of these driving factors that you see with the growth and the attendance at darn near every single venue that MotoAmerica visits. That's another one where I can point to Daytona, mainly because since MotoAmerica has taken over as the sanctioning body for the race, I have been to every single one since then, and it has been a steady and noticeable improvement in crowd size. And part of that is just that predictability of when that event is going to be held. Our schedule this year looks a lot like the schedule last year, and that's a good thing, I think. Speaking of Daytona, that's round 1, March 5th through 7th. Last year's race, to me, I still have a little bit of a bitter taste about that. Mainly with the absence of Yamaha's sort of factory presence. Now, Yamaha had the R9, that was last year was their first year that they were running this new model. They were able to get the homologation complete for World Supersport in plenty of time, and they had that bike at Phillips Island in February, and it won. I know that the homologation process for MotoAmerica and for World Supersport is different. And because of that, that's why Yamaha was able to get, the process completed for World Supersport before its first race of the season, and in doing so pushed back the MotoAmerica homologation process, and so it wasn't able to be completed by Daytona, and it wasn't really a big deal at that time because Daytona was not a points paying race last year. It was it was basically all those factors coming together last year that, prevented Yamaha from really having any sort of factory presence at the race. And it showed. Typically you get about 70 riders that will show up every year, 60, 70 riders trying to make this race. And last year we had 36, and everyone, I think except two, I think 36 made the race, 38 showed up, and just, that was just a little bit of a bummer. It just kind of felt like only half of the field was really there. Anyway, so now it's a points-paying race. That's not going to happen again because Yamaha's not going to come out with a new model for 2 years in a row. And I don't think anyone else coming out with a brand new model this year. So everyone should be there, and it's a points-paying race. Now, I know that some people, it's hard to please everybody all the time. And there's a lot of griping about, points being applied just as if it's a normal race, as if it's one of the races that we have over a weekend with 25 for a win, 20 for second. I like that point structure. I don't think it's broken, and I don't think we really need to fix it. I know this race is a little bit different, mainly because of its longer distance, and it does have a little bit more importance and prestige over the rest of the schedule. But I don't think it really needs to have, the point structure really be messed with, though. Make it a points event. This will ensure that we don't have a repeat of something that last year, where all of the big names and the big riders will be there. That's all we need to do. Let's just let everything else be and not try to fix something that's just not really broken yet. Or at least I don't think it's broken yet. Let's wait until it's actually broken before we try to fix it. All right. So the race itself, one thing I am going to be definitely looking forward to is I think it's kind of exciting. We have a chance to see history this year with this race, at least with the 200, because, nobody's ever won 4 in a row before, and Josh Herron has a chance to do that this year. So that's something to be excited to look forward to this weekend. Throughout the rest of the weekend, it's going to have the same, support races that they are every year, and that's going to be the baggers, the hooligans, and the twins. And I am totally great with all of that. There's not really much else that can run at the high banks of Daytona when it comes to MotoAmerica's classes, because Superbikes are too fast, and you don't want to put the Talent Cup out there or BTR because they're just those are riders that are probably not ready for the high banks yet, and there's some safety aspect there involved. So, besides, the baggers tends to be a great race because those big, huge fairing, motorcycles with the fairings tend to punch a pretty huge hole in the air in the drafting. And last year, if you remember in race 2 in the hooligans race, Jake Lewis was in 6th freaking place when he came out of the Le Mans chicane on the back straight and managed to win the race before they got around to the start finish line. I mean, it was phenomenal to watch. And the Twins Cup too, they always just put on such a good show. I said it at the top of the episode when I started the countdown, the 57 days of Daytona, which, it's kind of coincidental, by the way, because the 200 itself is typically 57 laps. But I look forward to this so much every year. Not only is it, the opening of the MotoAmerica season, but my birthday is always also around this time. And then the day after my birthday is my wedding anniversary. And it's just such a great time of year for me. I'm just so excited. I can't wait. All right. Well, once we get past the Daytona weekend, we got, just a little one class special coming up after that. Coming up on the weekend of March 27th through the 29th, at the end of that month, MotoAmerica is going to make what is technically their first visit to COTA with the Talent Cup. And it's only going to be the Talent Cup running that weekend, and it's in support of MotoGP when they make their annual trip to Texas. I think it's just a really awesome thing that the kids get to go and perform on the world stage. Like all of the movers and shakers, the powers that be, you name it, they're out there, and they get to watch our youth, our youngins go out there and try and make a name for themselves and put on a show. And that's just an awesome so that's an awesome opportunity for these kids. And I also think that MotoAmerica should be commended for going out out of their way to the level that they do to make sure that every single Talent Cup race is broadcast on Live Plus, regardless if it's a full MotoAmerica weekend or not. All right, after that, one-off bit in support of MotoGP, we kick off what I call the full MotoAmerica weekends. And the first one is at Michelin Raceway, Road Atlanta on April 17th through the 19th. Now, the reason why I call this a full MotoAmerica weekend is I don't really have a better definition than just it simply has both Super Sport and Superbike. You could go something. I try to think of something about the number of classes that are racing running of the weekend, but even Daytona has 4 classes, and I guess another one of the big things for me too with Daytona is that it does have that awkward format with being one single 200-mile race, and there is no Superbike. So, anyways, all that is to say, Road Atlanta is beginning of what I call, the full MotoAmerica season. And, if you remember back at the top of the show when I was talking about day and equity and how great it is for the series, well, this year we're kind of like we have a little bit of date equity-ish with Atlanta and Barber. They've been kind of bouncing back and forth between, where the first full Superbike round would be. And one of the reasons for that is because IndyCar has been kind of monkeying around with their schedule a little bit as well. They've been trying to get another oval to happen early in the season before the Indianapolis 500. And so last year they ended up moving Barber back to the beginning of May. And so that's why we visited Barber earlier in the season in April, and then just MotoAmerica or Road Atlanta. I think, from everything that I've heard, they've always been a very willing and good working partner with MotoAmerica. And so they were able to, push that date, to the time frame usually occupied by Barber. But now with this year, IndyCar is changing their Barber date back to April, and they're going to be a little bit earlier in the season. So we're going back to the way, we're going back to our schedule, as I like to say, as God intended, because there's just something about opening the Superbike season up in the North Georgia hills on that racetrack. And it's layout and the blind corners. It just makes some great racing, some great TV shots, and I really can't wait to get up there one day. Let's see here. When we do get to that weekend, we're probably going to have everything run, all the classes except for Super Hooligans, and probably not BTR. And I say, of course, I say probably because the BTR schedule is not officially out yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a repeat of last year. So that means that we'll have, Superbike and Super Sport, and the support races will be the Mission King of the Baggers and the Twins Cup and Talent Cup classes. After that, we're going to take almost a full month off, and we're going to go to Barber Motorsports Park. This is its traditional date. Well, I guess I can't really say traditional, because at the beginning of MotoAmerica, Barber finished the season, in September. So, but I think this date in May really works for Barber. And I really want to visit this place. I even had thought more than one time about making a trip up to the track, even when there's not an event going on, just to go visit the museum. It is the largest collection of vintage motorcycles in the United States, and it's probably worth the price of admission alone. And then when you throw in, it's not the best layout for a racetrack in the world. Like Superbikes aren't able to get up to 6th gear, and I do wish they had a little bit more room to kind of stretch their legs in that regard, but it is just a meticulously maintained grounds. It's just beautiful. The sculptures everywhere. It seems to be a well thought out and cared for place, and I just desperately want to go visit. All of the classes for MotoAmerica are going to visit there this year, except for baggers. The Mission King of the Baggers Championship will be the only class that does not run at Barber Motorsports Barber Motorsports Park this season. I should probably just go ahead and take a second and a sip of water. Oh yeah, because we're getting close to 20 minutes. I barely usually have episodes this long on a normal basis. No wonder I'm starting to kind of have my mouth get a little dry and everything. But we're just getting into the schedule. So let's carry on. After Barber, we're just going to take one weekend off. I like that. I kind of like having the races every other week. I think that makes like just a good pace and a rhythm, and it kind of provides you a predictability and ability, gives you the ability to know when to tune in, but also, you still have some time to have a life. I love motorcycle racing, but I like to do some other things too. And so it's nice to have some off weekends to, go enjoy those other things. I just don't like to have too many of them in a row. Anyway, so when the schedule first came out, when I saw this date at the end of May, I kind of originally thought it would probably conflict with the Indianapolis 500, and I thought that would have been a terrible idea. But then I finally, as I'm sitting here, as I went to get the show notes together in my outline, to get, I decided that I probably should actually Google when the Indy 500 is, and of course I was wrong. It's Memorial Day is, it's one of those weekends that you think it would be easy to predict when it's going to fall, but I seem to still screw it up more times than not. So this is going to be the week after the 500, which is important in this area because, in the upper Midwest, not everyone's an IndyCar fan, but everyone watches the Indy 500, and you don't want to try and run up against that. So the week after Indianapolis, we'll be up at MotoAmerica, America's National Park of Speed. It's a great weekend. We're going to have the normal Superbike and Super Sport, and they're going to be supported by the Twins Cup and the Baggers, and probably BTR, as I'm predicting is what their schedule is going to be. And I got to say, one of the things I'm going to miss is not having Talent Cup here. One of the things, whenever I have friends that I'm trying to get them into motorcycle racing a little bit more, especially MotoAmerica and, what's going on here in the United States and just the awesome racing that's going on, I don't send them a clip from a Superbike race or Super Sport or anything like that. I typically would send them, maybe a Junior Cup race. I'll send them a link to a YouTube link for a Junior Cup race at Road America. Or last year's Talent Cup race too, just batshit crazy racing that's just awesome, fantastic to watch. I do get that it's probably not the safest thing in the world because there is sort of a pack racing mentality, aspect of it, like plate racing at Daytona where you can't run away from the rest. So everyone's kind of artificially grouped together, but man, the results were pretty fun to watch. And the kids did a pretty dang good job of taking care of themselves. And I don't know. I'm going to miss it. I can understand why it's not going to be there this year, especially because MotoAmerica does try to alternate a lot of the support classes as far as if it's going to one racetrack one year, the next year it will, skip that track and go to a different one. But I don't know. I kind of liked having the Junior Cup and the Talent Cup that came after it being at Road America every year. Now, after Road America, we have our first one of those extended breaks during, in the middle of the season. We're going to have darn near 4 weeks, and we're going to have 3 full weekends off before we go to the Ridge Motorsports Park in June, from the 26th to the 28th. And that's way on up out in Washington. I think that this is a good marriage. And the reason why is because, I don't think the Ridge has any other, this is probably their premier event that they have. And that makes us special. And MotoAmerica looks good when we are special. And if this is going to be the biggest event a track has, and therefore in theory they're probably going to be more willing to go all out to try and make sure that your needs are met and taken care of. And I do think that, from at least my vantage point, I've never been there. I haven't been able to vantage that far, out to the Pacific Northwest. And I do hope to get there one day. But from my vantage point as a fan, just watching on Live Plus at home, it looks like this is, a track and a series that works together. And we give them a big event that gives them a little bit of legitimacy as a major motorsports park in the Northwest, and we get a place to hold our races in the Pacific Northwest, which is not something that has been a traditionally strong area for the AMA Superbike Championship in the past. So it's just a win-win. I hope this race continues on for a long time. This year's edition, we're going to have the traditional Superbike and Super Sport. And then in the support races, we're going to have Talent Cup there. We're also going to have the beginning of the West Coast Swing for the Hooligans, and then probably BTR. I say that West Coast Swing for the Hooligans, and it's a West Coast swing for a lot of people because after taking just one weekend off, MotoAmerica is going to then go just down the coast to WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca, down in Monterey, California, from July 10th through 12th. And I'm curious as to how this weekend, one weekend off works for everyone. And the reason why is because I think these two races, the Ridge and WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, I think they're always paired together just because they try to make those travel costs as convenient as possible for the teams. And so therefore, let's just say we got a twins, I don't know, there's twins at both of them, the Ridge and, no, Talent Cup is. So if we have a Talent Cup rider who's based out of New Jersey, there's a small cluster of riders that are all popping up from there. And let's say one of those riders, all they got to do is they got to take their bike and load it up and all their equipment, and they drive it all the way across the country to Washington. Now, typically, I think what happens is they find a place to store that equipment on the West Coast for those 2 weeks, and so they just fly back home in the time in between the races, and then fly back, and then do the weekend at Laguna Seca, and then drive their stuff all the way back across the country home to the places wherever they're from. And I think I wonder how well that works for everyone, and I'm going to try and poke around and just ask that question, because on the one hand you would think that you would want it to be maybe back-to-back weekends, and that would minimize the time of the equipment being out and the storage costs and everything. But a lot of the people in the MotoAmerica paddock are like me. I love doing this podcast, and I love trying to be a part of the series and following along. But I also have a real job. This podcast isn't paying my bills. And so I got to go out and do my 9 to 5. And so having an off weekend in between the two rounds, that gives these, series officials, team owners, riders, and whoever, it gives them a little bit more of an extended opportunity to go back home to their day jobs for a little bit before, taking another weekend off, going back all the way across country and doing another motorcycle race. So it's one of those things that, my kind of nerddom, I'm interested to see how teams and riders and personnel, what side of the fence do they kind of fall on? Would they prefer that it was just back-to-back weekends, get it done with and get out of there? Or do they like this, having a little bit of time in between for, just kind of remembering that you also have life? All right, so as we leave Laguna Seca, after that, we will take one more weekend off and then Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course from July 31st to August 2nd. And I've been loving this return to Mid-Ohio. There has just been big crowds, there's been big energy, and it's another one of these rounds, like Road America too is another one that when MotoAmerica shows up there, you can tell that they are a big event. And so therefore, whenever you're watching these events, these races on TV, you see the packed stands and all the crowd surrounding the racetrack, that this is a big deal. And it warms my heart to see, just the fans return and MotoAmerica putting Superbike racing back on a higher pedestal in North America, maybe even higher than what the AMA Superbike Championship has ever reached before. If we're not there yet, I think we will be soon. Anyways, I'm loving this return to Mid-Ohio. It's going from Laguna Seca to Mid-Ohio. Man, I feel young again. It's great. So while we're here at the sports car course at the end of July, we will have the Superbike and Super Sport, and then the support races for them will be the Mission King of the Baggers and the Mission Super Hooligans National Championship, and they'll be joined by the Twins Cup class. All right. So after we leave Mid-Ohio, we move on to VIR, Virginia International Raceway, That race will have that round will take place from August 14th to 16th, and this will be the last of a string where we're going to have one weekend off after Mid Ohio, and then VIR, and it's the end of a steady, sort of rhythm that begins with the Ridge, where we don't quite have a race every other week from then between those dates, but there's only like one instance of where there's a couple weeks off in between. Either way, it's just we this part of the season I love, because this is where one part where we get that steady rhythm going, and that interest that like not only builds, but like you're maintaining and just race after, and then it just stops with VIR. All right, well, let's finish with VIR first. It has a packed schedule. The Mission King of the Baggers will probably be the only class that's not running. And while they do run at VIR, it's typically on just the north circuit of the course, and I'm okay with that. There's, while the first full circuit is fast and fun to watch and, maybe cool, there's just a couple of areas on that backside of that course where the walls are just a little bit too close to the track for safety's sake. And so I'm okay with just running the north version of the circuit. This will probably be the final weekend of BTR. I'm guessing that, last year they wrapped up their championship at VIR, and I'm willing to bet that they're going to do the same thing again in 2026. And you know what? I might effort to get there. It's not an easy day's drive for me, but it is a day's drive. I think I've mentioned it before. I spent over 10 years driving a semi-truck. So, like, an easy day's drive for me, I realize, is not an easy day of just drive for everyone, including my wife. So, like, I try to be a little bit more realistic in that. But, hey, it's probably about 10 hours of driving to get there. I used to live in Virginia for a couple of years. I was stationed up there. So, that's VIR. And that's the end of that, that steady stream of events that kicks off in the summer in the Ridge. Now we have our second extended break of the season, and we have another 3 full weekends off and almost 4 weeks until the next round that's at Circuit of the Americas. That's another area where, like, I think we could add something in there. I'm not sure where, but, like, I would like to add something in there. Now, when we get to COTA, I always worry about the health of this event. And I don't, but I do at least have a little bit of a knowledge that there's a good chance that I'm just worrying too much. And the reason why I say all this, let me be a little bit more clear. COTA is just a massive facility. Huge. And when you see, MotoGP, but even more so the Formula One weekends, when it's just like there's fans everywhere, you got like 200,000 fans, 150,000 fans, it is just packed with people. On these weekends, when, say, MotoAmerica shows up, or back in the day, IMSA, or IndyCar, only ran there once pre-COVID, and anyways, NASCAR is another good example. When NASCAR shows up, because this facility is so big and it's meant to hold so many, like, we could have there could probably be, legitimately, no joke, there could be 50,000 fans in attendance at the COTA race. You can't tell on TV. It looks empty. And that's because it's less than a quarter of the way full. That's 50,000 fans at Road America. I believe that's probably close to what their record was. I mean, I'd be willing to guess that that's probably close, probably shy of the number they actually had in attendance last year for each day of the weekend. But it was probably somewhere around that number. When you take that, and even though COTA is a slightly shorter track, it's just the enormity of the facilities and the stands that all you see is emptiness. And I think that it is misleading. So all of that is to say, I think this event is more sustainable than it looks on TV. Because on TV, it looks dead. Another reason why I bring all that up is because I don't really like the date that COTA has. Being after Labor Day means that you're after the start of the college football season. And Austin, Texas is home to the University of Texas, the number one revenue generating college football team in all the land. Now, I know there's a lot of Texas people in the state of Texas that are not college football fans, and that's all fine and good, but like you can't just you can't tell me that doesn't affect the attendance at the track at least a little bit. That on Saturday, people are going to want to stay home and watch the Longhorns play, and then on Sunday, everybody in that damn state watches the Cowboys. It is disgusting. I'm not a huge NFL fan, but I'm so tired of the Cowboys. So I don't like the date because of that reason, and also weather. September in Austin, sometimes it can be a little hot. It can still be in the triple digits sometimes at that point. But with Formula One occupying a date in October and MotoGP running up in April, and we kind of, it is what it is on that front. I don't know if this date can really be changed so much, even though I think it should be, because there's not really a lot of better opportunities for it to be at. So this may just be it is what it is. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I hope that, that this event is better attended than it looks on TV. All right, let's move on from that. Oh, well, before we do move on to that, I should probably mention that the Superbike and Supersport will be supported by the King of the Baggers in the Super Hooligans National Championship, and they will also have Talent Cup as a support race. And this will be this will be the final rounds of the season for the Mission Super Hooligan National Championship. That's where they're going to crown their champion and hand out the number one plate. All right, well, let's move on to New Jersey Motorsports Park, mainly because, I keep trying to talk about these things about COTA, and COTA is such a, it's a great track, and I love watching it, but I worry. Maybe I think I'm worrying too much. I need to just go there one of these years, and so, I can answer these questions for myself and see the people, how many people are there, and what the vibe is like, and if people in town even know that an event is happening. All right, well, let's get to the last round. This might be the longest episode that I've ever recorded, and I didn't think that from the start that I was going to be able to get this in under 30 minutes, but I usually don't talk this long, so let's go ahead and get it wrapped up with New Jersey Motorsports Park. And this is another track that I don't love the date, and that's also because of football and weather. This one a little bit more so, not because of the football part. Like everyone up in that part of the state, surely, yeah, there's the Jets and the Giants and the Eagles fans, and they're going to want to watch football on Sunday, but there's not really so much the college football to contend with, and so Saturday is probably a fine attendance-wise. And I would be interested to see if there is any sort of drop-off in attendance from Saturday to Sunday. But to me, it's more the weather aspect. We tend to just have shitty weather whenever we go to New Jersey, and sometimes rain can add some excitement, but sometimes we're also trying to hold around in the middle of a tropical storm, and it's just not a good idea. But it is what it is. New Jersey is another track that I think that has been a very willing and partner in working with MotoAmerica, and I kind of think that they do a pretty good job of putting on the last races of the year, especially because the track layout, it usually does make some finally, exciting races, and who doesn't want exciting races to be the last ones of the year, So when we do get there at the end of the season, we're going to have the Talent Cup, and we're going to have the Twins, and we'll have the Mission King of the Baggers also finishing out their season there in support of Supersport and Superbike. I think they're going to be on the same format of track that they have been since the start. If you remember a few weeks ago, they did put out a press release that they're adding a little sort of a slight reconfiguration, adding a bypass in that final section of the circuit, but I don't think it was really needed for bikes. I think that was more of a move to make the car racing more exciting and easier for them to maintain driving side by side. So I think we're going to be on the same layout there. At least I hope so. Either way, 2026 is going to be a fantastic year. I still have a couple of reviews to wrap up. I got King of the Baggers and Superbike left, I think. And that should be it for those. And then hopefully I've been putting out some feelers and basically just straight up just cold messaging writers on Instagram, trying to get a handle on what everyone's plans are for 2026. And that way I can start doing preview episodes, because those 57 days that we have until Daytona, they're going to be countdown and they're going to be gone before you know it. And we're going to be there. And I'm going to be trackside in the West Horseshoe with my truck backed right up to the fence. And I'm going to be as happy as can be, smiling. And I hope to see you there with me. Until then, or until next time we record, whichever happens first. Who knows? Have a good one.